And one last look at your weather and traffic for your ride in on this Tuesday morning. Do have a new incident to report. This one's going to be at Clemson Road and I-20, so be careful as you're heading through that area, as well as down a little bit south of the city. You have an accident at I-26 eastbound, exit 125 as well, so be careful as you're going through there. Weather today, expected to get up to 94 for a high. Rain is going to be in the forecast. Be careful out there as well. 98 for the high tomorrow, 95 on Thursday. It's been your traffic and weather here on the early game. Nine o'clock on your Tuesday morning. Welcome in. It is The Extra Point. Tyler Head and Sam Shapiro from WIS along with you as we navigate through these old dog days of summer. We are now 53 days away from kicking things off. I said this last week, Sam. Once we finally entered the month of July, we could say we have football next month. Now, yes, it comes at the end of the month, August 31st, but nevertheless, August is right after July, and I'm clinging on the fact that next month, in some capacity, and that is at the end of the month, we will be playing some football finally.
We also got NCAA 25 coming up around the corner.
Oh, man. Did you see the gameplay video yesterday?
I actually have not, but
it was like 20 minutes long. I didn't get a chance to watch the whole thing, but they had one of the, YouTube streamers that does games like that. I'm not really familiar with him. And then Donovan Edwards from University of Michigan playing each other in a game. Mm-hmm. And you were able to actually see how, instead of just the highlights that you see in some of the trailers and stuff like that, how actually things were in the game, the different settings and the efficiency of passing and that kind of stuff. This game is extremely detailed. If you've played the NCAA games or Madden games in the past, I really think this game's going to put all those to shame.
Well, I can't wait to see all the memes that come out of it, especially that first week. And, there's always some bug fixes and some patches they got to work out in the beginning. So it'll be very interesting to see, what memes or, funny jokes, come out of the first, week of the game's release.
Oh, there's definitely going to be some kinks to work through. I mean, that happens with any game. That's not something that's foreign by any means. But when I think about the number of problems that Madden has in a given year, and there are entire YouTube accounts that are dedicated to just showing how crappy Madden has been as a video game. I don't think it's going to be the same problem here. There's going to be some things to work out and things to smooth over and stuff like that. I imagine that now that you have the actual players in the game, you'll be able to adjust ratings as the year goes along like Madden does. So there may be some updates and downloads that you can do as the season goes along. But from everything that I've seen of the game so far, I don't see anything detrimental to this point.
Oh, absolutely not. You're going to have college fans even more hooked already on, a sport that's not just fun to follow, but fun to play as a video game too. And I know if I'm getting my hands on it, I'm going to probably make the most unorthodox my player, so to speak, and try to, run through 4 years at the school of my choice.
Yeah. I'm excited about that. I haven't got as into the Road to Glory Campus Legend thing in the past couple games because Dynasty mode is so good. I've said before, I've already picked out Kennesaw State is going to be my team of choice, and we're going to take them from an unknown in Conference USA to the top of college football. I will provide updates as that goes along. It's going to take some time, but that is my objective when I get this game, is to make Kennesaw State into a national powerhouse.
I kind of want to pay tribute to my friend Paul out in Hawaii and maybe take a dynasty from the University of Hawaii, see how far they can make it.
Listen, Hawaii back in 2007, they were an undefeated team in the regular season, one of the best teams in college football. Now they got smoked by Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, but they had the entire nation talking. And anytime that you can have success out there, it's definitely worth garnering attention. So I don't think Hawaii is a bad choice for that.
Yeah, would definitely like to help them get some sugar this time around, maybe.
Definitely so. So again, we're right at a week from the early release of the game. I don't have the pre-download of this game. I'm actually waiting until Friday so I can go buy a physical copy of the game because I'm nostalgic like that. Like there was something, I brought this up to Bill and Preston earlier. There was something so fun about like, hey, I'm going to get in the car or my mom's going to drive me or whatever it is. We're going to go to Walmart. We're going to go to GameStop. I'm going to find the game. And then on the ride home, I'm going to be reading the back of it. And just like that hype and anticipation is something I feel like you don't get when you just download the game off the PlayStation Store or Xbox Store or whatever. Like, I don't know. Maybe that's just like the childlike wonder, but that's something I really enjoy that I look forward to doing with this game.
Oh, yeah. There's no other way to do it, really. I mean, that's the nostalgia, getting in the car, getting your hands on that physical copy. When I feel like you were able to first download games online and you didn't really have a reason to go back to the store, it almost kind of took away from that entire experience. I mean, even when I go back and play some old video games that are, that are not NCAA or, that are not Madden, then I think about the time I went to go get the game, what the day was like.
Yeah.
So now, it'll be nice. I love that. I love that for you because that's the way to do it.
Did you ever go to like the midnight releases of any games back in the day?
I did. There was one Black Friday, the year the Xbox One released.
Okay.
We camped out. Me and my brother camped out for it. I think we got it for like $600 or something. It was a pretty.
Which was a deal at the time.
Oh yeah. No, but yeah, I remember we were on. This was back when I lived in the city, so we were on like 86th Street and like Lexington Avenue at like midnight, and then the Best Buy across the street was selling like flat screen TVs, so we did like a little 2-for-1 kind of thing, and it was actually good because we needed an HDMI cable to get the Xbox to work.
Right.
And we had one of those old box TVs. We hadn't gotten a new TV in like 10, 12 years, so that was why we went to camp out in the first place. So we were like, all right, I guess we'll just get a TV, get a new Xbox.
You spend a lot of money that night, morning, whatever it is what you're telling me.
Well, the Xbox actually didn't work. We had to return it. We picked the wrong system. We should have picked the PS4 because we had to return our Xbox like twice before we could get it to actually work. But once we got it to work, it was great.
Yeah. Well,
it was just, that was a process.
I still have to go buy a PlayStation 5 over the course of the next week. Mm-hmm. Hopefully it works. And then go buy the actual physical game next Friday.
Well, when you get the system in the game, you got to let me know because.
Oh, definitely so. No, I will be spending a lot of the following weekend playing EA College Football 25. Like that is my primary objective that weekend. I hope nobody expects me to do much else. And I'll get in as much gameplay as I can. It's also going to be kind of a reward at the end of SEC Media Days. Now, you have not got to experience SEC Media Days from our perspective, but it is a very chaotic week here at the radio station that you will get to see for the first time next week. Beamer is going to be a part of the lead group that talks next Monday, where he's going to be speaking to the media, I believe early afternoon. I don't have the exact time as of right now. He announced yesterday, or the school announced yesterday, is going to be taking Bogey Huntley, Debo Williams, and Luke Doty with him as the player representatives. And this is going to be not the last chance that we get to hear from coaching the players for the season, because there'll be some preseason, media sessions and stuff like that. But this is kind of the checkpoint of the year where went through spring, heard from Beamer every week there, heard from a handful of players. We haven't heard from anybody roughly in about 2 months now. And I'm not expecting anything groundbreaking necessarily with the information that we get, from media days, but it'll just be good to hear a little more insight from the people actually coaching and on the field compared to what we've kind of been lacking here as of late.
And it definitely is pouring gasoline on the fire, so to speak, in terms of the excitement that kind of develops, in this dog day kind of period. Now this is kind of a culmination of, we were kind of excited over these last couple of weeks, but now this is something to really allude to that excitement.
Well, and there's so much reason to be excited for the season overall. And I brought this up to you. Our guy Mike Uva from Gamecock Central presented 5 questions for South Carolina ahead of media days, and a lot of these really revolve around the unknown of this team. And that's where I guess my optimism lies in this team for this year. Because, again, last year was disappointing. They went 5-7, missed a bowl game. Nobody likes that. But there's so much new on this team. So many positions have been revamped and added to through the transfer portal, through high school recruiting, and all these different ways that I'm not sitting here and saying, well, I expect South Carolina to go out there and win 10 games, something like that. But really, you don't know what you have until you actually see it out there on the field. And even hearing from what these players, obviously Coach Beamer, are going to say next week, that's still not going to give us the insight that we want until we actually see the games, kick off at the end of August.
Absolutely. And I know me and you have kind of been talking about, specifically some of these issues since I've, kind of started coming on and talking with you guys about, this team, specifically, with the offensive line, configuring kind of the defensive schemes. So I guess now, when you kind of have the media day, it's kind of like now we're going to actually start to tease you and, give you a reason to, be excited for some of those changes.
Well, and that's the thing about media day is that nobody's going to go up there, sit at the podium and tell you things that are going wrong. They're like, well, we're not looking too good in this area, and we think we're going to kind of suck at this part of the game. Like, no, they're going to go up there and they're going to pump their team up or their position group, whatever it may be, to make you feel good coming away from it. It's kind of almost our job to read between the lines and decipher. And you're somebody that works in news. You do these kind of things all the time. You gotta pull out what's not being said from what is being said and try and draw conclusions that way sometimes.
Yeah, and I wish we didn't have to do that as much. I wish they would kind of just say, well, maybe we should work on this, or maybe we should work on that. But obviously, like you said, they're not going to dwell on, what possibly could get better at this time. They're going to focus on what looks good right now, what people should be excited about. And I think, given the time we're in, the dog days in between when football is going to start, it definitely makes that kind of countdown to kickoff kind of get there sooner in a sense.
So the first question that Yuva proposes on Gamecock Central for the Gamecocks on media day is, how confident is this coaching staff and Lenore Sellers being ready for this moment? Again, we've talked about it 6 ways from Sunday this offseason. Lenore Sellers, highly touted guy, local kid, coming in a season ago, got to play a handful of snaps in garbage time, and everything that we saw of him in game situations looked great. Looked great in the spring game. Everything that we've heard of him up to this point and seen of him through practices and spring games and all that kind of stuff has been as advertised. How do you handle going out there and actually being the guy, being the starting quarterback, getting the keys of the team handed to you and making sure you don't crash the car? Like, that's the great unknown of this. I think he's going to be great. I think he's got a good head on his shoulders. Again, every indication up to this point has been fantastic. How confident are they that he's going to be able to go out there and execute? I'd say pretty high.
I agree with you. I think they're definitely confident he's going to come in and play at a high level. I mean, he definitely had an NFL caliber quarterback in Rattler to kind of take notes from last season, and I think that's going to serve him a lot of justice this year, especially because Rattler kind of had, in my opinion, a less refined, less adjusted system to kind of work with. So Sellers has kind of had a season to, take away from Rattler what has worked, what hasn't worked, and the team has kind of used that also as an example to kind of, I feel like, give Sellers a better setup to, let him kind of be a better quarterback, let him kind of carry the team in a way he wants to do that.
Second question, you mentioned a moment ago, what have they done to improve the offensive line? Again, this was a position that was just decimated by injuries a season ago. There's only so much you can do with that. They went out and they added a ton of bodies in that room. They're returning a lot of guys that have the potential to start this season. Again, you just got to knock on wood at this point and hope everybody stays healthy. And look, injuries are going to happen. You're going to have tweaks. You're going to have, knees and ankles and stuff like that may be injured. But you just can't afford to have a wide sweeping amount of them like you had a year ago. And you should theoretically be better at that point.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, a lot of what we were talking about, I think, last year with the problems in the line was they couldn't keep the same group of guys on the field throughout the season. They were adjusting pieces, moving guys in and out throughout the year. I mean, you have 3 SEC conference guys returning, this year, and then they got 6 new offensive linemen to improve from, again, last year. So I think, it's going to really depend on if they can keep those veteran guys on the field together throughout multiple games, like at least 6, 7, 8 games, because they're going to know how to work with one another and have better synergy. And because Sellers is such a, mobile, flexible player, that I think will work to, his advantage as well.
We'll get to more of these questions coming up as the show rolls along. He is Sam Shapiro from WIS. I'm Tyler Head. It is the Extra Point on your Tuesday here on The Game. Welcome back in. It's the Extra Point. Tyler Head, Sam Shapiro along with you on this Tuesday. Teaming to break down our guy Mike Yuva's 5 questions for the Gamecocks headed into SEC Media Days coming up next week in Dallas. Again, Coach Beamer will be speaking on Monday. It was announced yesterday that Boogie Huntley, Debo Williams, and Luke Doty will be attending as the player representatives for South Carolina. So we'll get to hear from them as well and what they think of this team as we head into a new season. Let's get to question number 3 here that Mike Yuva poses. And he asks, who will replace Xavier Legette at wide receiver? And I think the simple answer to this is nobody is going to be able to replace what Xavier Legette did at receiver a season ago. You're just going to have to hope that the wide receiver room as a whole can supplement for the production that he brought to this team, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and when you have one guy, that's NFL caliber like that, it's going to seem like they're going to have to rely on a lot of pieces that, they've brought in from not just the transfer portal, but guys that they brought up from high school as well. I mean, it's going to be tough to kind of fill his shoes, definitely for sure.
Now, that being said, nobody foresaw Legette having the breakout year that he had a season ago. There was, inklings towards the end of 2022 that he was starting to maybe come into his own a little bit, but nobody thought he was going to be the superstar that he was a year ago. That obviously it helped that Juice Wells was gone for pretty much the entire year. So there's always the possibility that could happen again. There are guys that are on this roster, maybe Elijah Caldwell, who didn't really get much run last year, that could maybe emerge and be a superstar this year. We just don't know. And we're obviously looking at Nick Harbor, Tyshawn Russell, guys like that coming back for their second years, hopefully taking steps forward. And then you just have this full complement of new guys coming out of the transfer portal, a lot of them with similar skill sets, also as well as Davon Campbell from Nevada, who's a little bit of a taller guy, somebody can play that X wide receiver 1 outside spot that Legette occupied. But again, it's one of those things that we're just not really going to know until we actually get into the season and see how Dow Loggins chooses to use these guys in his offense and how effective they can be.
Yeah, it's going to come down to, when those pieces kind of come together and if they kind of mesh well together. I know, like you were saying, there are a lot of guys coming in from the transfer portal, specifically Gage Larvadane and Jared Brown are going to be 2 interesting guys to see how they kind of mesh with some of the guys that the cast that's the returning cast, but then also the new cast of guys that's coming into it. It's going to be interesting because if you kind of plug in a bunch of all new guys, it's very boom or bust. It's very boom or bust kind of situation. And I think when you have a lot of, experienced talent kind of coming in from somewhere else, the returning cast, has a bigger burden in kind of showing them how to run the show, but, also showing them how to, mesh with the scheme of things so that it's a cohesive, product.
Well, and Luke Doty being one of the player representatives next week for South Carolina is particularly interesting to me because he's somebody that we haven't talked about as much when it comes to the wide receiver room this offseason, but he is somebody that a season ago basically made the transition over to wide receiver, was still technically a backup quarterback as well, but focused more on wide receiver, and every indication up to this point, he's primarily focusing on wide receiver this year. So, I mean, what kind of role can he play? Can he be somebody that steps up? I'm not expecting him to go out there and be the guy, but can he be more of a featured role, maybe be that 2 or 3 receiver in this offense? Again, I'm just kind of shrugging my shoulders at a lot of things because I don't know right now, but it'll be interesting to hear his perspective on where his game is at now that he's been able to more primarily focus on one position over another.
And I think breaking those guys off into, that wide out 2 and that wide out 3 role, coming into a position like, the guy you were talking about is, because it can kind of coach them up, similar to, Sellers, the position Seller was in last year, kind of watching Radler. He was able to kind of take notes from an NFL caliber quarterback. And even though he didn't have, the season that I guess Gamecock fans necessarily wanted to see that he was having, he could kind of take that, go back to the drawing board, and then, come back this year. And it'll be interesting to see what he kind of took away from that, because, if he took a lot away from that, then I guess the wide receivers have something to learn from that example as well.
Question number 4 here. What can playing a 3-5 more on defense this season mean for South Carolina? I know you weren't here, when we were talking about this towards the end of last season, but Carolina's defense was not good for the first 2 months of the season. They were bottom of the barrel in the SEC in a lot of different categories. Something had to change. So from a scheme standpoint, they were the base is a 4-2-5. they transitioned more into using 3-3-5, which has always been a part of what they do on defense, but they just featured it a little bit more, and the defense as a whole got better. Yes, some of the opponents weren't up to snuff to what they played in the first half of the season, but numbers are numbers, and they still got better on defense as a whole at the end of last season. So that's been the big question this entire offseason. We even talked to the Clayton White defensive coordinator at Pro Day a couple months back, and it's going to be a part of the defense. We just don't know how big of a part it is, and it's not something that you want to put all your eggs in that basket, because the more teams have tape on you of doing that, the more they're going to be able to adapt, and it's going to lessen the impact. But it's something that I do hope is featured, and I think a lot of people hope this, is featured quite a bit this year, considering the success you were able to find with that at the end of last year.
I totally agree. That actually kind of alludes into what I was, going to say as well. It totally opened things up for guys like Bam Martin Scott, alluding to kind of that success at the end of the year. In the last 4 games, he had 32 tackles compared to just 6 tackles through his first 6 games of the season. I mean, seeing guys like Dylan Stewart come in, seeing the opportunities, that adjusted scheme is going to open up for guys that are going to be, rushing the pocket, that are going to be applying the pressure. It's going to be exciting defense to watch.
Perhaps the biggest question, number 5, what does successful season look like in year number 4 of the Shane Beamer era? I've set my line at make a bowl game. I know that's not lofty expectations. That's not sniffing the college football playoff. But if you can take a step back in the right direction and get yourself back in the postseason and win at least 6 games, that to me is enough to say, okay, year number 3 wasn't what you wanted it to be. You let some games slip through your fingers there. You're back on track at least a little bit here in year number 4 with what is an incredibly, incredibly difficult schedule.
Well, I know me and you have talked about, again, like you just said, the difficulty of schedule compared to this year, compared to last year. I think if you took even last year's team if you took this year's team and you put it up against last year's schedule, I think they would have been almost a shoo-in to do much better, going into this year, assuming they had last year's schedule. But, I mean, looking at LSU, looking at Bama, I mean, if they win 10 games, I think that's a pretty a bowl game is exceeding expectations, in my opinion.
Yeah, and God, if they won 10 games, there might be a parades in the streets. That would be quite the accomplishment. And again, when you don't know so many things about this team, you never want to count out any possibilities. Again, as long as they can just get themselves back into the postseason, I'll be satisfied, and I'll say that they've done enough to at least move back in the right direction. So we'll see what happens with that. Again, Media Days coming up next week here from Coach Beamer and the players starting things off in Dallas on Monday afternoon, I believe. I don't have the exact time for when they're going to be speaking just yet. We will transition a little bit because we talk a lot about television revenue, television ratings. We never really talk about watchability. What makes a game watchable to you? There's an interesting list that I came across yesterday, and we're going to dive into that coming up next. It is The Extra Point. He is Sam Shapiro from WIS. I'm Tyler Head on your Tuesday on The Game. I was out at the Peach Festival in Gilbert on July the 4th, and I went over to the Canty Foundation booth, met some folks over there, and let me tell you, they were as nice as you can believe that they were, which is what you expect with Canty Foundation specialists. Truly great customer service that is personal and just as down home as they are here in the Columbia era. They'd also want me to remind you that you need to be on the lookout for foundation problems with your home. Cracks in your exterior brick, cracks in walls or above windows and door frames, doors and windows that might be a little bit sticky, uneven or bouncy floors, or cracks over your garage door. If you notice any of these problems in and around your home, you could have serious foundation issues. That's why you need to go online to cantycanfix.com and schedule an appointment so one of those pleasant, caring people from Canty Foundation specialists can come out to your home and evaluate and make sure your foundation is good for you and your family to live in going forward. Again, schedule an appointment online today at cantycanfix.com for Canty Foundation specialist. Welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler Head, Sam Shapiro from WIS along with you on this Tuesday. Who has done the heavy lifting? Brought to you by our friends over at TEC Equipment Rentals in West Columbia. I'm going to give that award this week to our guy Paul Skeens, pitcher for the Pittsburgh Pirates, first overall pick in the MLB draft last year, and an all-star this year, sitting with 5-0 record, 2.12 ERA, 101 overall whip, 78 strikeouts, only 12 walks in 59 and a third innings, and surprising a lot of people, maybe not surprising a lot of people, but did earn himself a bid into the All-Star game. The first time a rookie first-round pick as a pitcher has been able to do that. It's been very quick ascension to the top for Paul Skeens. We'll get to him a little bit more in a few minutes, so we'll close out the hour with some conversation around him and that All-Star game. I want to talk about this, though. We obviously consume football at a high percentage here. College, NFL, as long as it's football, most people around here are probably going to watch it. I don't know how concerned a lot of us are with the watchability of games. I think there are some teams we're going to watch regardless. Obviously, South Carolina, whether they're winning by a lot, getting beat by a lot, or playing a competitive game, most people here are going to be locked in no matter what. But when you look at these other games around the country, some of them, you look at that and say, well, that's a really appealing matchup that I think is going to be a good game, therefore I'm going to watch. Kelly Ford of, let's see what the website is here, of kfordratings.com has this scale that he put out yesterday of highest watchability of college football games in 2024. Said this is a weighted score of projected quality, which is an average of the K4 ratings, and competitiveness, which is an average of what he calls K4 spread. So that assigns a point scale to each game, with the best being a 10.0 score. Games with a 10.0 score this year: Georgia and Texas, Georgia and Alabama, Ohio State, and Oregon. South Carolina, this is a list of the top 40, has appeared on this list twice, with games against Ole Miss and LSU both coming in at a 9.4 on the scale of 0 to 10.0. So my question to you, Sam, as well as to everyone on the Firehouse Subs text line 803-404-6100, what makes a game watchable to you? Like, what qualities do you look at in a matchup that maybe you weren't otherwise thinking of watching? What has to be presented to you beforehand to say, you know what, I think I'm going to tune in for that one?
Well, I think the two biggest things are, the two teams that are playing, who's part of those programs and what are those two teams playing for? I know that over the last couple of seasons, the Bulldogs have had a lot to play for in terms of, preserving that undefeated run. I know Texas and Bama were both kind of subject to, maybe even making the college football playoff last year. So I could see why those matchups against Georgia are very highly anticipated. Penn State versus Ohio State, always a very exciting rivalry. So I could see why that cracked the top 5 on this list. But I think it's a little disrespectful to put USC and LSU at 40. I know me and you are both optimistic in that this season's going to be a little bit better than for the Gamecocks. And I think it'll be a little bit more of a competitive matchup against LSU, just to put them at 40. I would at least put them in at least the top 35.
Well, and when you're looking at this scale, you are splitting hairs because the point differential between being 40th and being 30th is literally 0.1 on a scale of 0 to 10.0. So it's very tight. And maybe the unknowns that we talked about earlier with a team like South Carolina can keep those numbers down just a little bit compared to maybe some of the other games. I do think you're right. I think the overall brand of team or teams involved goes a long way because, yeah, you say, okay, Georgia and Texas are going to play. All right, yeah, that's really compelling considering these are two of the best teams in college football. Penn State and Ohio State, kind of the same thing. Michigan and Texas at number 7. That's another game that's going to gather a lot of attention just because of the brands on the field alone. Regardless of what's going on and how good these teams are, how bad these teams are, the brand attracts you. I think the stakes also have a lot to do with it as well. I look at 9, where you have Texas and Texas A&M at a 9.9 rating, renewing their rivalry for the first time in over a decade. It's going to be in College Station. Look, I think Texas is a far better team than A&M this year, but that game and the atmosphere and just the vitriol between these two fans, that's going to be very watchable to me, even if Texas is leading by 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. I'm always, just because of the nature of that rivalry, I'll still have that inkling in the back of my mind, like, don't count A&M out of this thing just yet.
Exactly. It's rivalries like that, when you're a 6 or 7-year-old kid and you turn on the TV for the first time and you're like, Mom, Dad, what are you watching? And they're like, just sit back. They're not going to go, oh, we're watching this really cool college football game. All they need to say is just sit back and watch.
Right.
And, you really just take in that whole, it's games like that really, create those core memories,
Sure.
bring you on the field, make you love the game, really.
Well, and you have the brand, you have what's at stake, and then just the fact that it's probably going to be a competitive matchup. And I think at the end of the day, that's what we all hope for. I mean, how many times are you channel flipping on a Saturday and say, all right, well, this game is now a 17-point game. Let me go find something else that's a little bit closer. And it may not be a game that you care to watch, but if you're flipping channels and you see, hey, Syracuse and Wake Forest are tied at 28 with 5 minutes to go on the CW, yeah, I'll check that out. We'll see what happens. Again, I didn't really have a care to watch either one of these teams, but if they're playing a close and competitive game, I'll check it out because you never know what's going to happen. You might end up learning something about one of these teams that you otherwise didn't know. So when I look at this list, there's a lot of games on here that I look and say, man, that could end up kind of being a coin toss type of game. Number 17, Tennessee going on the road to Norman, Oklahoma in week number 4, a 9.8 rating. That's one of those to me that I say, yeah, I think that's a game that could be a 4-quarter rock fight between two teams with new starting quarterbacks. That interests me a lot. The Alabama-LSU thing is always a really good game, regardless of where both teams are at, especially when you play that game in Death Valley. That's at number 10 at a 9.9 rating. So, looking at games that you think you're going to be able to invest all 4 quarters into and, position a portion of your day around, that raises its watchability quite a bit to me as well.
I don't know. I kind of looked at this, I guess, chart when you sent it to me, and it's the 2020 watchability chart. I look at it as the top 50 most games you should be getting fired up for this college season. I mean, I was looking at all these games, and I was like, oh, even if, I'm not really invested in any of these teams, and I'm just like, oh, that's going to be a good game. I'm going to want some popcorn for that one. So, it's charts like this that really just, get people really, really excited before you get to, like media day, the beginning of the college season, and even, before the release of NCAA 25 in about a week.
Well, and the one thing I love about this list, and again, this is just the opinions and numbers based off of this one specific set of data from Kelly Ford rankings, but I love the fact because they note which weeks these games are being played in. You're getting what are deemed to be high-quality matchups seemingly every single week. I see weeks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Like every week of the season, you're getting some kind of what should be a high-quality matchup across the landscape of college football, because that's the unfortunate thing that has happened in so many years, especially in the SEC, what we used to call Cupcake Saturday on the next to last week in November, where, you're playing a rival next weekend, but everybody's playing Charleston Southern, everybody's playing, Georgia State, everybody's playing Middle Tennessee, these teams that aren't going to put up a fight. That doesn't create a compelling day of college football. That's kind of gone out the window now. Yes, you do have some teams that are still playing lesser opponents in November, but it's not across the board like it's been in years past. So if these rankings and ratings hold true, we should be getting high-quality matchups across all of college football guaranteed each and every week.
Yeah, I was going to say, even for the vanilla college football fan, if you need, a good schedule to go off of, what games, should I watch throughout the year, this is a great way, or a great tool, rather, to kind of use, if you're looking for an exciting game every week, here you go.
Now, do you position yourself beforehand going into the weekend, like with a list of specific games that you're going to watch, and just kind of leave the interpretation up to what else kind of fills those gaps?
Yeah, I usually flag 2 or 3, like, all right, this is the game people are talking about. If you make sure you can try to catch at least some of it to an extent, and if you can't, be sure to watch the highlights and look up who truly made a difference in telling that storyline of the game.
Do you believe in screen fatigue? Do you believe you can have too many games going at once?
I don't know about that. Yeah, I don't know.
I usually don't push past 3.
Okay.
I know some people, they'll have like 8 games going on at once. I'm like, that's a little. There's no way you can possibly take in the information you need and thoroughly invest in 8 games at one time.
It
That's
depends how
overkill.
much you can kind of, if you depending on how much, I guess, time and attention you want to allude to each game. Like if you pay attention to, I guess, 3 drives in this game and then the next 3 drives in the other game, but then you backtrack some of the drives you missed in the first game while kind of watching the second game, it kind of makes it easier, but also, easier said than done.
See, I like to not go fast 3, where I'll have primary game on TV, and then on my laptop, I can put 2 games on at once, do like a split screen kind of thing, and I think I'll keep, so the TV volume's the loudest, and then I'll have like the volume on one of the games on the computer, and then the other one you're just kind of glancing over and checking in on. Like, that's about the limit of how far I go. If I have 3, what I need to be very watchable games going on at once.
Oh, I can't do the volume with more than 2, if anything, because if I've got 6 different guys talking to me about how some guy's slanting to the left and then they're throwing a crow route to the right and then they're kicking a field goal from the 45. Nope, I can't do that.
Yeah, it can be a little bit of overkill, and everybody's different. But that's kind of where I draw a line in the sand there. So that's, again, the watchability chart from Kelly Ford Rankings as we look ahead to the 2024 college football season. I mentioned Paul Skeens a moment ago. He's getting set for the All-Star game coming up here in just a couple of days' time. Some controversy, though. Should he be a starter? We'll dive into that coming up. It is The Extra Point. He's Sam Spear from WIS. I'm Tyler Head on the game.
Not really. Yeah, I haven't thought about it a ton. Up to this point, obviously starting the year in AAA, the odds of going to the Major League All-Star game are pretty slim, and so that wasn't one of my goals necessarily or expectations of this season, but just a huge honor that I'm able to do it, obviously over a short period of span in the big leagues.
Welcome back in Extra Point. Tyler Head, Sam Shapiro from WIS hanging out with you on your Tuesday morning. That was the voice of Paul Skeens, starting pitcher for the Pittsburgh Pirates, on being selected to his first All-Star game. Now, this is a guy that did not make the opening day roster as he was making his way through the minor leagues at that point in time, but quickly ascended up the ladder. And for those that, got to watch him the past couple of years at LSU, we knew how good he was, and he has certainly lived up to that billing so far in the 10 starts that he's made at the major league level, and making the All-Star game as well. The first pitcher ever taken number one overall to make the All-Star team the following season. The controversy, though, surrounds if Paul Skeens should start the All-Star game. Let's go to cut number 6 from yesterday here, Dave. This is Jeff Passan on ESPN making his case for why he thinks Paul Skeens should start next week.
Not just on the team, but was chosen by Major League Baseball, which I think is great for the league to actually acknowledge that even though Paul Skeens hasn't had the counting stats or the number of starts or the experience that some other pitchers have, he brings an element of excitement to this game. I truly do believe that people would tune in to watch Paul Skeens pitch, preferably at the beginning of the game, though there were a lot of people who responded within the industry to that idea of Paul Skeens starting over, say, Ranger Suarez or Chris Sale with, oh, come on, you got to earn it. Well, what I think is that Paul Skeens has earned the eyeballs of people who want to watch baseball, and that is what the All-Star game is about. It's celebrating the game and just how great it can be. And Paul Skeens, guys, is great.
So baseball is a sport that clings to tradition unlike any other, and that's been a detriment to Major League Baseball at times over the years. I kind of am on Jeff Passan's side with this. I don't have a problem with Paul Skeens starting the All-Star game. I don't think he has to, quote-unquote, earn it in the old-school way like some people say. I
agree, actually. Kind of breaking off from that tradition, I think, could do wonders for the MLB in this case, and considering what the, that all-star festivities for the MLB used to be, back in the 90s. I mean, having, somebody that, is that clearly the fan base is very excited about, he's a new face, having him kind of come in early could get a lot of people, more people excited about watching that game in the first place and can get more eyeballs just watching the game in general.
Well, that's the fun thing about the All-Star game, because baseball has become such a regional sport, because your team plays almost every single night. So you are primarily watching your team play, and yeah, you'll catch highlights here and there of some of the other teams, but rarely, unless you're going against them yourself, are you getting to watch Paul Skeens pitch on a regular basis. He pitched against the Braves a couple weeks ago, so I got to see him in those games, but I'm not watching Paul Skeens on a night-to-night basis. If I know he's starting the All-Star game next week, I'm like, hey, I'm going to make sure I have the TV on if I want to see Paul Skeens pitch at the start of that game, as opposed to, all right, he might come in, who knows when, maybe the casual person be less inclined to watch the game. And this is an exhibition at the end of the day. The All-Star game holds no weight. I do love the fact the All-Star game in baseball is kept more to being what the actual game of baseball is, better than any other sports All-Star game has been. The NBA All-Star game's a joke. The Pro Bowl's flag football now. Like, at least the Major League Baseball All-Star game is, resembles a baseball game like we see on a night-to-night basis. And again, this is a way to grow the game, to expose your stars to people that don't get to see them a whole lot. I don't think starting Paul Skeens is something that is worth the uproar.
I look at this scenario as like you take Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift and you throw it in the MLB, with the sense of Livy Dunn as well.
Sure.
I mean, she has created so much popularity around him alone, and she is still at LSU, which I think is funny. But, having, that kind of piggyback off of, also being the first pick, also being a talented baseball player out of LSU. I mean, I think he would bring in so much more viewership to that game. And I think, Livy definitely helps with, his overall popularity, and would kind of allude to that even more. So I think that's why, this discussion of having him come out and start the game, as a, being an all-star in this role, it definitely is setting him up for, why this is really a debate.
So some of the others, as Jeff Passan mentioned there, of guys that he's competing with for the starting role: Chris Sale of the Braves, Ranger Suarez of the Phillies. When you look at their numbers overall, I mean, they're really not that drastically different. You can say, oh man, this guy's been overwhelmingly that much better than what Skeens has done up to this point. Yes, both those guys have pitched in more games to this point in the season because, of course, Skeens did get called up a little bit later on into the year. But again, I don't think it's that drastic of a difference to say, oh, well, it would be just a shame if Chris Sale doesn't start because his numbers are leaps and bounds better than what Skeens are up to this point.
Yeah, I don't see, Suarez or Sale, kind of having historic numbers, so to speak, that would kind of give them this. They've earned the role to start, be the starting pitcher in the All-Star game and kind of, carry, start the voyage into, what that 9-inning All-Star game in 2024 would look like. So I think it would be kind of interesting to kind of, see them kind of switch it up and, kind of break away from the pitcher that, so to speak, earned the starting job, but, maybe somebody that would be more exciting and would, want to attract more people to kind of actually watch the game.
So we'll see what the official decision is. Again, I don't have a problem with it. If Paul Skeens does end up starting, I think that could be beneficial to the game of baseball as a whole, which is a game that is trying its best to grow as much as it can compared to where it's been in recent years. That'll do it for today's edition of The Extra Point. Appreciate you, Sam. We'll get you back in next week in the middle of SEC Media Day, so that'll be a whole lot of fun with everything going on out there in Dallas, and get your thoughts on what's going on out there as well. Coming up next, the Garnet Trust Hour with today's guest, South Carolina offensive lineman Kason Henry, sitting down with Chris Clark. That's coming up next here on your Tuesday on The Game. Got some rain in the forecast as the week rolls along here in Columbia. And as I like to remind you, if you have an open crawl space under your home and you recently experienced a storm, you might have some standing water under there that could cause some issues. Things like high humidity and condensation in your crawl space can create an environment for things like mold, mildew, and pests, including things like termites. That moisture can also lead to wood rot and floor joist problems as well, because musty smells or awful odors can come from that mold and mildew in your crawl space and may cause health issues like runny nose, itchy eyes, or coughs, because up to half the air that you breathe in your home comes from your crawl space. That's where our Canty Foundation specialist comes in. They can get in there and evaluate your crawl space and make sure it is in the proper condition to serve you and your family well going forward. If you have any problems with it, schedule an appointment online at cantycanfix.com. Again, schedule an appointment online at cantycanfixit.com for our friends at Canty Foundation Specialists.